particular, because of that legacy, have to operate with the understanding that they need to be ahead of the curve when it comes to openness and transparency and accountability, and not behind it. All of us now have cell phones and video cell phone technology. And if we're under 40, we even know how to use it, right? So that's going to mean that events that happen everywhere, you're going to have crowdsourced accountability of these events. And confrontations with police officers, fatal involved police shootings, they usually have a little greater warning than some of the other tragic events of drug hits that happen on our corners. So departments have to be armed not only with body cameras and cameras in their cruisers, but they also have to become much more open and transparent in reporting discourtesy, excessive force, and use of lethal force. I drove down fatal involved police shootings to 3 of our 4 lowest years as mayor. We always reported our discourtesy and our excessive force cases, and we managed those down every year with better supervision, better training, with an early alert system. So that if a police officer racked up several complaints over a short period of time, we pulled him or her off the street for retraining or to figure out what was going on. So these are all things that I contained that are in that talk, and they're things that we need to do as a nation. We require every department to report their top 7 UCR crimes. We need to also report murder, rape, robbery, auto theft, and those. We need to demand that all departments report their excessive force, their brutality, and their use of lethal force. I've learned as a manager that the things that get measured are the things that get done. And we know what works.
Excellent. Thank you very much. No, that's terrific. I think there was enough questions that have warranted at least that much time, so thank you. So a question, switching gears, a question about corporate taxation. You had mentioned about 70% of our economy is in consumer spending, but corporate investment creates future growth opportunities. What is your position on corporate tax and corporate tax inversions, and how would you get businesses that have left the United States to return?
I am supportive of the bill that Senator Durbin and others are pushing through Congress that would make these inversions much, much more difficult. As a nation overall, I mean, there's been such a concentration of wealth and power in the politics of our country, and that has had and that sort of concentration has led to a tax code that I believe makes it easy for large multinationals to avoid taxes and puts onerous burdens often on small businesses. And we need to fix it. We need to simplify our tax code. And we also need to, I think it's foolish for us to allow foreign profits to be deferred until they're repatriated. I think we need to find whatever the right rate is so that it's paid immediately and not deferred, sitting out there as if it's a bunch of parking tickets waiting for an amnesty in the city. And so overall, I would like to see greater simplification of our tax code. If you look at the trend over the last 40 years of where our revenues come from as a nation, more and more of the revenues come from payroll taxes, and fewer actually come from corporate taxation. We need to figure out how to reward productive investment in our nation again. This sort of hyper-speculative financialization of our economy isn't good for an ecosystem of inclusion and opportunity and productive work and productive investment. And so I think we have a revenue problem in our country, and I do believe that the wealthiest among us need to be asked to pay more in order for us all to make our country stronger for our kids. And I would like to see greater simplification in corporate tax so that small businesses aren't getting that kind of chain while GE or other big corporations pay zero.
Thank you. 2 questions on your position that you stated earlier about minimum wage. And one person actually put their name to it, so thank you, Cheryl, Marcel, wherever you are. Thank you very much. All right, so why do you think it's possible to raise minimum wage to $15 without increasing costs universally through inflation? And do you feel, and again, bringing multiple questions together, what would be the effect on job growth and new business startups by raising that minimum wage?
In my own state, we raised our minimum wage to $10.10 an hour statewide. But two of our counties, Montgomery and Prince George's, raised theirs to $12.80. And we did not see any sort of exodus of businesses running to the border. In many other cities now, I think you're going to see cities get there before states. New York, Seattle, and other places raising their minimum wage to $15 an hour. We saw in our own state no displacement whatsoever from that. And I believe that the way our real economy works is that when workers earn more money, they spend more money, and then your economy grows. We tried it the other way, and we've seen what happens. When you concentrate wealth at the top, when you try to remove regulation everywhere, and you try to keep wages low so you can be more competitive, or whatever the hell that means, what you create is a country with anemic growth. Our workers need to be able to earn more over time. I think one of the geniuses of our nation, our formula of action, is that for many years, since 1947, we've always kept the minimum wage above the poverty line for a family of two. In other words, it was a living wage for a family of two, up until around 1980. And then we stopped raising the minimum wage in a timely fashion. And it fell way behind. So the minimum wage is not a living wage anymore. And that's not good for our economy. We have to, there are many levers we need to make the investments that only the public, we together, can make in our infrastructure. But I do believe we need some basic floors. We need wages. And I've never seen one instance of increasing the minimum wage. I mean, I'm sure if you raise it to 40 an hour or 30 an hour, but if you look at the $15 minimum wage and achieving that over the course of these next few years, it's really not out of line for where we were in, say, the 1960s and the early 70s. And I believe that that's what makes our economy grow.
Terrific, thank you. Several questions talking about your governance philosophy. And how does your governance philosophy differ at the local, Baltimore, state, and federal level? And you do talk about strong leadership at all those roles. However, Pew reports over the last several years show that there's a widening gap between Democrats and Republicans. And how are you going to be able to muster some bipartisan support when President Obama has not?
Yeah, this is a question all over the country. I've now gotten up on the chair and given the talk at 62 of the 99 counties in Iowa. And almost without fail, someone always asks the question, how are you going to be able to pull us together? How are you going to be able to work with a rather obstructionist Congress or a divided national politics? And I would suggest to you that the better question, for those of you that will be making your choice on the Democratic side of this primary process, is which of the three of us actually has a record of bringing people together over deep divides. That's what I did in our city, where the divide was not by party, but by race and class and place on some pretty thorny issues. That's what I did as governor. There are many things. Some of those things I mentioned is that we accomplished as a state, I would only have achieved. We were only able to get done because of some Republican votes. So repealing the death penalty was one of those. Marriage equality was another. I felt it was my job as a Democratic governor to get to know the Republican members even better than my own. So we looked for opportunities to break bread. I figured that's why they gave me the free rent in the mansion, right? It was to bring people together, have breakfast, break bread, talk to one another like human beings, reinforce what the Tocqueville called the strength of our soft ties. True story, towards the end, we have a 90-day legislative session. And towards the end of it, I turned to Joe Bryce, my legislative director, and I said, Joe, we need to crank up some more bipartisan pizza nights as we head into the stretch here. And so we were over there, and Joe came up to me and he said, why do you invite Senator so-and-so of the other party? He said, he never votes for any of your stuff, and just an hour ago he was trashing you on the Senate floor and attacking your character. And I said, well, Joe, it's only pepperoni. So I've learned how to bring people together and get things done. In terms of governing philosophy, I'm of a different generation and a different institutional perspective than the other two. I mentioned that I've been an executive, but I'm also of a different generation. And as a mayor, with the advent of new types of technologies that allow us to instantaneously measure the performance of our public institutions, actually and private institutions, things like geographic information systems, the internet that can make this transparent and open to all. I've learned how to get things done by calling people to those common platforms, by creating collaborative circles of engagement, not on an annual budgetary basis, but on the basis of outputs every 2 weeks, asking the question around that circle, whether the endeavor is reducing crime or whether it's reducing nitrogen, phosphorus, and sedimentary flows into the waters of the Chesapeake Bay, to ask the question of all of those around that table every 2 weeks, are we doing any better this week than we were last week in terms of moving to goal? What are the leading actions? Show me the compelling scoreboard. Let's lift up the leaders. Let's move this endeavor forward. That's what modern leaders do. One of the happy facts I came home with after traveling around the country before making this decision is most of us feel a lot better about how our cities are managed and how our cities are led and how our cities are governed. Not that we've had a federal agenda for that, which is another piece of my plan. I'm the only candidate to put forward a new agenda for America's cities. But I think we feel better about how our cities are managed because mayors never had that situational advantage of knowing things 6 months before the public. Everybody knows when you're mayor whether what you're doing is working or not. And so these new tools of instantaneous openness, transparency, and performance measurement, mayors have taken to. People want to see that at their state government, and I look forward to, as mayor, I created a system called CityStat. And Harvard, the Kennedy School, they gave us the Innovations in Government Award that year. And the big innovation was measuring outputs instead of measuring annual budgetary inputs. And then we created that same process, enterprise-wide for state stat. We measured the effectiveness of drug treatment programs in a holistic way in terms of their recidivism, the number of failure analysis, the stable home address, and those sorts of things. And as we got more funding, we rewarded those programs that showed the measurable improvements. This is the new way of government. I look forward to bringing FedStat to a White House near you. It's not unlike the Six Sigma stuff, and Jack Welch and all of that sort of thing.
We're starting to run low on time, so I want to make sure we switch speeds. And I want to talk, there's